Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank my colleague from Louisiana for her courtesy. Mr. Secretary, always good to see you. I'm glad you're smiling. I see good things in the budget proposal, the new energy frontier, the climate change adaptation, the treasured landscapes. I think those are all great initiatives, and I want to salute you. Look forward to trying to be helpful in the process. But I do have a couple of questions of things I'm concerned about. We have a drilling contractor working in the U.S. Waters that worked on the rig that blew out off the coast of Australia last year, which worries me, and that's why I wrote you in November to ask you to launch an investigation into the safety of Seadrill Limited operations off our shorelines. And I received a letter stating that MMS is going to undertake such a review, but I have not heard the results. So one is I'd like to know when we can expect those answers.
As a result of your request, Senator Menendez, MMS was asked to provide technical expertise to review the cause of the oil spill. According to the note that Pam just handed me, the MMS has engineers and other technical experts involved in the investigation, and the investigation is not yet complete. But if I may, I think that
do we have a sense of time frame?
I can get that. I will get that to you,
yeah.
Senator Menendez, on the completion date.
Now we see reports from a whistleblower that BP's enormous Atlantis platform in the Gulf of Mexico is lacking the proper engineering and safety documentation, which MMS appears to be downplaying. And, you know, you know, if this advocacy for offshore drilling is going to continue, then it just seems to me the question is, what type of oversight are we going to have to make sure that all of the, you know, aspirations that are out there, that we have all the greatest engineering, all of this is environmentally safe, and yet, you know, you have Seadrill Limited's operation and what happened there. You have this information about Atlantis. What is MMS doing to ensure that, in fact, we have the safety precautions to make sure that, you know, we don't have risks?
Senator Menendez, first let me say we take our job very seriously in terms of policing what happens in the offshore. I have visited the rigs in the Gulf Coast, for example, to see what our employees are doing to monitor what exactly is going on and what we would do if there was a spill response. And I think when you look at the record of what we have done with offshore oil and gas production, we have a very good record. It does not mean that it is a perfect record, but it is a very good record. Over the last years, MMS has conducted over 34 research efforts into looking at how we respond to oil and gas spills that might occur, continuing to further our knowledge about how we manage these issues in the waters. And there are huge differences. For example, there are huge differences between how you respond to an oil and gas leak or spill in the Gulf of Mexico than you would in some places in Alaska in the Arctic. And so you have to look at issues such as the environment, issues such as the infrastructure, and the availability to be able to respond if some catastrophe like that were to occur. But I will just say that we are aware that there are environmental risks when you do oil and gas development in the ocean waters, and that we are doing everything we can to minimize the potential exposure.
Well, as you know, I have real concerns about what is envisioned in the outer continental shelf, certainly along the East Coast shoreline. And those concerns to both our environment and to our economies in states like New Jersey, for which our tourism industry is the second largest driver of our economy, we cannot put it at risk. And you and I have talked about that when you were a senator. You and I have talked about that in your confirmation hearing. And you and I have talked about that since you became the secretary. And so these instances drive me to be increasingly concerned about this drive for opening up the Outer Continental Shelf, and I look forward to the answers from MMS. Two final things. One is I appreciate what you have done in both in Ellis Island, opening up the crown of the Statue of Liberty. I'm pleased to see that the budget has $25 million allocated for maintenance work on the Statue of Liberty. And I want to applaud you for that tremendous work, but I don't want us to forget about the other parts of Ellis Island that need to be preserved. You had an opportunity to see some of the old hospital buildings on the New Jersey side of the island. Does the department support funding to refurbish those important buildings? We are trying to work with all of the stakeholders to forge a plan that creates a public-private partnership here with institutions like Save Ellis Island. And I hope, we've had a little challenge in moving forward there. I'd hope we'd see greater progress. We haven't. And it's tough to raise, monies to help preserve when we can't get the partnership that we are looking for. So I hope, based upon all of your commitments that you've already made, that we could go to the final step and be able to achieve that. So if you could answer that question for me. And then very finally, offshore wind, I appreciate that you came down to New Jersey. There are some of the leases that are established there. But from everything we hear from the private sector, there's a suggestion that this could take anywhere between 7 and 10 years in the process. I've heard that you're one of those advocates of trying to consolidate maybe one-stop shopping or some other efforts to truncate that time period somewhat so that there can be real investments made at the end of the day. And I'd just like to get your sense of that.
On two of your points, Senator Menendez, first, there would be nothing more important to me personally than, frankly, getting Ellis Island totally restored and open to tell America's story on immigration. And I think that's one of the jobs that I have as the Secretary of the Department, is telling America's story. And you can't tell America's story completely unless you talk about immigration. And Ellis Island, I think, is ground zero where most Americans can trace their roots back to their ancestors coming through Ellis Island. So we will continue to work on it. It is an expensive project. We have put in $10 million into this budget by my decision to move forward with a partnership. And I hope that we could do something there similar to what we did on the Statue of Liberty, where we created a private-public partnership that ultimately ended up putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into its restoration. We have other projects like that we'll be working on, for example, here at the National Mall. But Ellis Island, for me, remains at the top of the list of priorities for those kinds of initiatives. With respect to Atlantic offshore wind, I have met with the governors from all of the states on the Atlantic. I think today there is huge potential for us to stand up the offshore wind in the Atlantic. We have seen what the UK and Denmark and other places have already done with offshore wind. And there is tremendous interest on the part of the private sector and the states for us to move forward. So it's an area where I am personally putting a significant amount of my time in. And one of the areas that we are looking at in depth is how we can shorten up the process. It is, in my mind, completely unacceptable to have a developer of an oil and gas wind farm having to wait 7 to 9 years to get to final permitting. That's not going to happen. We're going to do within it. We are looking at existing authority relative to how we can fast track offshore wind projects. And to the extent that we come up against barriers, we will come to this Congress and we will ask, Senator, for your support in getting some of those barriers out of the way. It is interesting that in the onshore, we are currently, under our onshore authorities, fast-tracking about 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy power from solar, wind, and geothermal alone. And because of the fast-tracking process that we have been able to put into place, those projects, we hope, will be permitted by December of this year. We need to move with the same kind of acceleration in the offshore.
Thank you. Thank you very much.